On today's show, the Cleveland Cavaliers will open up their preseason slate without Evan Mobley. We're going to talk about that and more on today's show. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. That includes YouTube. Please go subscribe to our channel if you have not already.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
The music you heard on the way in is from our friends at Astro Radio. Check them out on Apple Music or Spotify. I'm Chris Manning. I cover the Cavs and NBA at large for places like Dime on UPROXX and SB Nation Fear the Sword. Evan Dammerl, my co-host, is not with me today. He is out and about in the world doing some stuff, so it's just a solo Chris episode for your Wednesday listening pleasure. This episode, as always, though, is produced by Jake Stevens. And remember, Locked On is your team every day. In Cleveland, we have the Guardians, Locked On Browns, and Locked On Cavs, and Locked On Buckeyes, Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. A ton of great stuff if you're so inclined. Today's show is going to focus in segment 1 on Evan Mobley's injury. Segment 2, we're going to get into the preseason opener, what we're looking for, what to see as the Cavs kick off their slate. And in segment 3, we're going to talk about the NBA's annual GM survey, where the Cavs were, as you would expect, considering they traded for Donovan Mitchell and have Evan Mobley, and were a surprise success last year, discussed quite a bit. But to start with Evan Mobley, the team announced just after we finished recording our previous episode for Tuesday that Evan Mobley is going to miss 1 to 2 weeks with an ankle sprain. This is a right ankle sprain that he suffered in practice. He, per various reports, stepped on Robin Lopez's foot while driving to the basket. He had an MRI. This injury occurred on Saturday. There isn't any concern as far as anyone can tell as what has been reported. What JB Bickerstaff said at media availability on Tuesday, that this is going to keep Evan Mobley out for the season opener. If it's a 2-week injury, that's before the October 19th regular season opener that's against the Raptors in Toronto. It is possible they are super cautious with it. Maybe it takes a little more time to heal, and he's back in 3 weeks. Dave DeFore, who is the basketball internet person I would most like to have a dinner with and just chat about life. Maybe some of these guys maybe need a month or whatever. And I tend to agree. Give these guys time to rest, get really right, and not push it back. But this isn't a severe injury. This isn't something that is going to hamper Mobley's season before it even gets started. That is not the concern here as far as the reporting indicates, talking to people indicates. The what is being said about it is not so much that this is a problem, that this is something that is going to keep him out like a while. This isn't like a high ankle sprain. This is just a run-of-the-mill ankle sprain that's going to be 2 weeks, and then he's back. The issue with it, in my opinion, is that Evan Mobley is now going to miss time as he is getting started ahead of the regular season. This is time that he could have used to just get a feel for some of the things he worked on in his game this summer. Some of the things that he spent the summer trying to improve on and show in his game. There's also just times for him where you'd want to see him with Donovan Mitchell in this context. This is going to be an ongoing in the regular season thing to develop chemistry between, Mobley and Mitchell and Allen and Mitchell and Garland. This isn't something that can just be wiped away via some preseason basketball. But what helps is that if you have some preseason games, and even if you play a quarter or a half and whatever, you're getting some of those reps. You're getting to go against Philly and Orlando and these teams in Atlanta in the preseason. And you also get more time to practice. In the preseason, you have space to practice. You have space to get in actual reps, to work on stuff behind closed doors. It is a lot harder to find that stuff in the regular season, where the games, as the season goes on, things get more condensed. You're just trying to get any rest you can. you just don't get as much time to really explore some of this stuff. It becomes, what can you do on the court in these moments? And this is just this is kind of denying Mobley a chance to do some of that. This is denying him and the team a chance to just start meshing now. It's not going to totally, hamper the season anyway. This isn't such a massive issue that I think you need to be concerned about it or like worried if this is going to hamper Mobley's season. If there's no, indication that that's going to be the case. To quote JB Bickerstaff directly, he was asked, does he think he's going to miss the start of the season? And Bickerstaff said, quote, obviously we'll see how he responds to all that. We'll always be safe with our guys, but right now there's no concern that he'll miss the start of the season. Look, if he gets asked about this in a week and that change, or 2 weeks and that change, and we don't know when he's going to be back and all that stuff, we will, maybe that's when you put the sirens on, you ring the alarm bell, and you get a little bit concerned about what this injury is. But all the indications now, this is just robbing a chance to build a rhythm. This is robbing a chance to get a little bit of games under their legs. This is robbing practice time. That is what this takes away more than Mobley's health. The concerns that there's something wrong. And look, this just also changes the dynamic of what you'll see Tuesday. We're going to talk about this more, or I will talk about this more in segment 2. But, what do you do from a starting lineup perspective now? Last year you would have just been, okay, throw Lowry Markkanen at the 4, we'll play a more traditional wing at the 3, whatever. But does this mean Kevin Love starts? Does Dean Wade start? What does that all sort of look like? Does that obviously is going to change what you do schematically. You can't do a lot when you don't have Evan Mobley on the court in a lot of different ways, but whether it's him and Allen, whether it's him by himself. You can maybe do it with Allen, but like you can't run that zone they loved to run last year, that 3-2 zone where Mobley's at the top of the key and being in the Superman kind of thing, the KG role that they've so effectively kind of leaned into with him. I think like defensively for Mitchell, that would have been beneficial too. I'm sure they've worked on it behind closed doors and in camp. Media does not get to watch practice, so like we can only ask what is being done and then have to take their word for it and see. And sometimes you don't really get full truth on that stuff, and that's fine. That's whatever. In these circumstances, you would maybe want some game action to see how Mobley would look with Mitchell in this context and just kind of get Mitchell the rhythm to do some of that stuff. It also would be fun to see Evan Mobley play basketball again. We've seen, obviously, the clips in the summer. We've seen the little hints of what he's been working on. It doesn't compare to the real thing. And yes, it's preseason. Yes, this isn't the regular season opener in Toronto, which should be a ton of fun, or like a meaningful regular season game or a playoff series if we want to look that far ahead. But just getting to see Evan Mobley play basketball again is really fun. This season feels real when you get to see the best players in the world go and do their thing, see how they grow, see how they've improved. And no Evan Mobley takes away from some of that in the preseason, some of the intrigue about what we're going to see. Not all of it. Mitchell's obviously the headliner in some of that, which we'll talk about, but no Mobley just changes the dynamic of what the Cavs are in the preseason, and I think just ever so slightly is going to change the full integration process now that he has that little ankle issue. Okay. After the break, I'm going to come back. We're going to talk about some key preseason opener things to watch for, including what does Mitchell do? What does he look like? Who starts? Obviously, a little bit more of interest now with the Mobley injury and much, much more. But first, I got to tell everyone about a great sponsor that we have here at the Locked On Podcast Network, and that is Prize Picks. Here's what you need to know about Prize Picks. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Pick projections, based on what you bet, you win. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It is just you versus the projections available. It is really, really easy to use and fun to play. Peter Appel from the Just Baseball Show, for instance, does a great job talking about this on their podcast, does it on Twitter. Go check out his feed if you want to kind of see how this works better than I can explain it here. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport you watch. That includes the NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, the PGA, college football, men's college basketball for women, WNBA, soccer, esports, MMA, anything you can go bet over at PrizePicks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. It offers safe, Safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code. That is locked on. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter that promo code, though. That is locked on, and sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And go try out PrizePicks today. I think you'll have a ton of fun. Okay, back here on the Locked On Cavs podcast, I am Chris Manning. Evan Damerl is not with me, but he is my usual co-host. Jake Stevens, as always, is doing a great job producing the show, making me sound crisper and smarter than I often am. So, looking ahead to Wednesday night in Philadelphia, this is the Cavs preseason opener. Philly has already played a game, but this is a 7 p.m. tip. The Cavs will play Philly twice in the preseason. They'll play them next at home on next Monday on October 10th, and they host Atlanta on that Wednesday, and then they finish the preseason a week from Friday in Orlando. So this is one of four, the first game. And I think, obviously, the interest here, if you were to say this is the Sports Center top over or the newspaper A1 story, whatever your form of talking about that is, this is about Donovan Mitchell. What does he look like? How does he perform in his first, not official because it's preseason, but first time out in front of fans in a Cavs uniform playing basketball? What does he look like? That is going to be the fun part of this. You know, he'll get defended by Anthony Melton, who is a very stout defender. You know, he's going to have to defend hard and Maxey and do some stuff. And it's not full go. It's full go, but not like the full intensity of playoff basketball or even really good regular season basketball. But we're going to get to see Mitchell do some stuff, and we're going to get to see what the Cavs template for him is as we get started here. You know, we're going to see how much of Mitchell, at least these early inclinations of, you know, what does he carry over from Utah? What are the Cavs asking him to do that's different? How do him and Garland work together? And what are some of the subtle little differences? There is an evolution to come here. We're not going to fully understand it on this one game, and it's going to take some time to mesh. Again, no Evan Mobley certainly means that it's going to not even look the way it does Wednesday when they open the regular season, right? Like, this is going to look different when Mobley is back because Mobley is that integral to what the Cavs do and what they are. But as Mitchell gets going, you get to see him do some stuff. I'm curious just to see what he looks like, what kind of the game plan is with him. And it'll just be a cool thing to, you know, we've seen the media day photos, we've seen the photo shoots, seen the press conference, seen him at the Browns game, all that stuff. See him in an actual Cavs jersey. Whether you're a fan, whether you're like me covering the team, you know, whether you're just an NBA fan who likes to watch basketball, this is kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, this is getting started. This is real. It's going to feel real. Let's start to see what it looks like in this game one. So the other part of this is who starts and what does it look like. I think as we understand it, there's three guys we know for sure starting. Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen. Mobley would be number 4 were he healthy. What is unclear is they're kind of being tight-lipped about it. JB Bickerstaff has not, you know, declined to say who is the starter, who is the starting small forward. He is not elected to, as I'm to quote Danny Cunningham, an article he wrote over for thelandondemand.com. Shouts to Danny. They've not elected to name a front runner for that starting spot. They haven't named a starter for Wednesday. This is what Bickerstaff has had to say about that spot. Quote, the level of competition has been high, for sure. I think all the guys that are in that spot have had their moments, and they continue to push each other. A lot of our evaluations are going to come from in-game reps in these preseason games. Again, when you're playing another opponent, you get a chance to see what your group needs. So we've got to put them on the floor and get those reps against other opponents. I suspect that Karis LeVert is perhaps the starting 3 as we get going here, seeing how this begins. He is, if you kind of do some Twitter sleuthing, look at some of the videos, look at some of the things the Cavs have put on social, he's in the same color pennies as Garland and Mobley and Allen and Mitchell. So in that, even coming into the season, that was kind of the indication of he will be the maybe the first guy to get a crack at starting at the 3, and we'll see what that looks like. But with Mobley out, you know, do they? I would suspect Dean Wade is maybe the other guy that starts here. Maybe it's Kevin Love, but Wade would kind of, I think, make a lot of sense just from He can be a little wingy. He can shoot. He can play some defense. Like there's some stuff you can do with Wade, and I think he's more in contention to start than Love is at this point. But we'll see how all these guys look. They're gonna have 4 games, each of them to kind of, see who is gonna play, who is gonna get the starting minutes, who's gonna get those starting spots, particularly that starting small forward spot. And we will just have to see how this evolves in real time. But this begins in Philly. This begins with them, whoever the 3 is, maybe defending PJ Tucker or Tobias Harris for stretches, attacking one of those guys, and how they look in those kind of matchups. A little funkier, a little bigger. I think both those guys may be a little. I think Harris in particular better up at guarding at 4. So can if it's Karis LeVert, kind of maximize being guarded by a guy who defends up better than he defends a wing. How that looks will be interesting, and that's certainly the most consequential has meaning right now thing about these preseason games is who kind of stands out among that possible group to start at 3. The other part of this too is that Bickerstaff has said that whoever plays and who will play in this game is going to be based on who's healthy. Everyone who's healthy will play. So we'll see Howell Neto. We'll see Robin Lopez. You would presume Dylan Windler and Jetty Osmond and Lamar Stevens and Dean Wade and like all these guys who are not locks for the rotation, who has something to prove. Does someone pop out of that group, right? Does Dylan Windler come out and shoot the leather off the ball and is in blistering and look great? Does Jetty look competent? Does Jetty look comfortable? And does he find a niche that makes a case for his minutes? Does Dean Wade look particularly good? How does Okoro look? Kind of a separate conversation, but how does he look? And does anyone really stand out on the edge and go deeper? Like, what do RJ Nembhard and Isaiah Mobley, these two-way guys, what do they look like in NBA action against? They'll be against backups, I'm sure. Maybe Isaiah Mobley's going up against Paul Reed, B-Ball Paul, who, not a star by any means, but like a more proven NBA player. Maybe he goes against Montrezl Harrell, the new backup center in Philly, like who's very active, particularly on the offensive glass. How these guys look in these circumstances, I think, will be interesting just to kind of see. Because if everyone's going to play, does someone pop, make a case for themselves, build? Maybe it's building on something we're not seeing because we're not seeing the stuff behind closed doors, not seeing practices. Is it a surprise to the coaching staff? There's all these little things that how they play out will matter to some degree. And I'm curious to see just who maybe does pop, who maybe does have a better game than we expect, if anyone. It's not a lock, obviously, but who looks good, who looks comfortable. What kind of tone does that set as we go forward here? I'm looking at those end of the roster guys in some ways more than I'm looking at the front of the roster guys, because eventually I think ultimately, like, we know what we're going to get out of Darius Garland and see from him. The role is maybe a little different now, but we know what it's going to look like for Donovan Mitchell. We know he's very good. We know how good Jared Allen is. But, what does Lamar Stevens look like now? What does Howell Neto look like in this context? What do Windler and Osmond have to provide right now? Will they make a push for minutes? These are all parts of the preseason that are interesting. They're worthwhile for the coaches. I think it's in a lot of ways more meaningful than kind of the front of the roster. The Mitchell stuff will be fun. The first dunk he has, I'm sure, will be a Twitter highlight and all these really big things. There's more going on than that, though. Okay, one last break. Going to come back, talk about the NBA's GM survey right after this. All right, last segment here on the Locked On Cavs podcast. So a couple things. I'll link to the survey below, but if you Google it's the NBA GM survey, they will have this whole thing in there, and you can take a look at it. There's a bunch of questions. Best defensive player, who win the title, who's the most versatile player in the NBA, all these other questions. The Cavs were through this a bunch. I thought it was interesting. They were slotted in at 6th in the East in the GMs. No one had them higher than 4th, and that was 14% of the vote. That feels about right to me. I think you got to prove something in these circumstances, but there's clearly a respect that this team could be top 6 and really be a team that if can avoid the play-in. To just go through the top 6 in the East, they went in this order. Milwaukee, you got 72% of the first place votes for this. Boston, Philly, Brooklyn, Miami, Cleveland. Those are the top 6. Other teams that got votes, this is just very interesting to me to see that the Cavs are there. We go out west, the top 6 was the Clippers, the Warriors, the Suns, the Nuggets, the Grizzlies, and the Mavs tied with the Wolves at 6. So an interesting sort of. But the Cavs did not get any votes to win the NBA Finals. The Bucks are the favorites to win the Finals according to NBA GMs, but they got some top 6 respect. I think that is interesting, and that kind of goes hand in hand with 2 other things. Evan Mobley was the leader for breakout season, 21% of the vote. That's 4% ahead of Cade Cunningham, 4% ahead of Anthony Edwards. And Donovan Mitchell was widely viewed as the biggest impact. 59% of general managers voted that he's the move that offers the biggest impact from the last offseason. This also lines up with the Cavs being tied with the Pelicans for second in the most improved rankings. The Clippers were first, considering they're getting Kawhi Leonard back. I say this tongue in cheek, but a healthy Jason Preston. These are teams that made big moves. The Cavs obviously go get the Donovan Mitchell, do the Donovan Mitchell trade. They make some really big moves. They were voted, as they had the best overall moves in the offseason as well. There's so much belief, I think, league-wide about how talented Evan Mobley is. And I think what this tells us, more than anything specific, and even taking this as like gospel, because this will be wrong. Last year, 72% of general managers said the Brooklyn Nets are going to win the NBA title. We know how that went. Kyrie didn't get the vaccine. Kevin Durant, ends up wanting a trade request this summer. Has some injuries. James Harden asks out. Ben Simmons never plays for them. They lose in the playoffs to the Celtics, who end up making the NBA Finals. They could be wrong, right? They could absolutely make mistakes and have predictions about things that's wrong. There are things, obviously, that on paper, you look at this and say, okay, maybe that turns out a different way. Maybe injuries happen and that puts a dent into someone's season and odds of hitting their ceiling, right? Luka Doncic in this was 48% said he's going to win the MVP. 37% last year said KD to win that category. Like, these things are not foolproof predictions. But I think what it tells you and what is interesting about it is that the Cavs are on the minds of other people in the league. What they did this summer and the talent they have is there. Evan Mobley, being ahead of Cade Cunningham, being ahead of Anthony Edwards, being ahead of Zion, who is 4th at this, is telling. That you don't vote that just to vote it. Like, you were voted to have a breakout season. That tells you other general managers think he is special, that he is viewed that way in the league. Scotty Barnes didn't get any votes in this, so take that for what you will, compared to how these GMs think about Scotty versus Mobley. They're viewed as having by far and away the biggest offseason move. That tells you that there's some expectation the Cavs are probably going to be pretty good because they got Donovan freaking Mitchell, and that is going to be a big deal. This was above Rudy Gobert going to Minnesota. This was above Jalen Brunson going to the Knicks. This is above PJ Tucker going to Philly. These are all just things that are telling that the Cavs are on the radar, that they're good. There's expectation for improvement. There's expectations that this is a team that is competing for something. And I think that is entirely fascinating. This is a different place for the Cavs to be. This is not a place that I think this franchise has been in without LeBron James in 20 years. You could probably go back to the Mark Price, Brad Daugherty era for when there's real expectations to this level, without LeBron on the roster. Even last year, obviously, last year's success in a lot of ways came out of nowhere. Garland takes his big leap. They do it without Sexton. Rubio is, such a smash hit. They deal with all these injuries. Mobley's great right away. Allen makes an all-star team. All of this stuff. This is a team that you look at it and I think it just feels different. There's a buzz. There's an energy. There is something to compete for. There's weight to what's going on with the Cleveland Cavaliers now in just a way there was not. I don't think they are viewed. They are not viewed as a foolproof title contender. They are not viewed as someone who, are going to wow people on the other end of the floor. They were voted as the most promising young core. But they're not voted as, okay, this is the team that will have the most efficient offense. This is the team that will have, that has great home court advantage. JB Bickerstaff, does not come up among the best coaches in the league, and I don't think he's there. But like, he doesn't come up in, who's going to have the best defensive scheme and all of these things. They are viewed as, I think, very solid, very interesting, but there's still another layer to kind of go up based on what you're seeing here. The top head coaches, the best manager and motivators of people in the league, which is kind of the lane I think Bickerstaff is going in. It's Kerr, then Monty, then Eric Spoelstra, then Ty Lue and Pop are tied. Best coach in the NBA, it's Spo, it's Kerr, it's Popovich, it's Monty, and it's Ty. Budenholzer gets votes. Taylor Jenkins gets votes as well. Bickerstaff is not, viewed in that class by other general managers league, and I think that's fair. He'd probably tell you this, the same thing. This is a situation where they are viewed, I think, positively. They're viewed as interesting. They're viewed as really on the up and up. But are they foolproof? Are they locked in as a lead in all of this stuff? I think no, and I think that tells you a little bit about where they're at least how they're viewed, about where they're at among the decision makers in the NBA. So check that out. It's always worth kind of cursing through seeing some of that stuff. I'm always fascinated by the rule changes. One of them was the coaches challenge plus automatic reviews, including keeping challenge if it's successful, is at 17% that won. Some other interesting changes in there as well to kind of read about, think about if you're interested in what the NBA and how that all stuff kind of works. But basketball's about back. This is always a reminder that it's back, and the Cavs feature in it much, much more than they have in the past because they're actually interesting in a real way now in the way that they haven't been in a long time. All right. That is going to be it for today's show. Again, Evan Mobley injury update, preseason opener, and talking about the NBA GM survey. A couple programming notes. Number one, I'm going to do a Spotify Live at 6:30-ish on Wednesday. Going live before the Cavs game. I'm going to hop on there, see if some people come through, talk about Cavs basketball, talk about Cavs preseason, just kind of vibe, hang out, and chat about the game. Maybe we'll hop on at halftime as well if there's some demand there. Just a little extra interaction about some Cavs things as we're getting interested in what's going on there. Secondly, Evan and I will be back on the Thursday show recapping that preseason game. We're going to do our very similar format to last year. We're going to do our big takeaways. We're going to do game awards, and we're going to empty our notebooks from the game. We're going to try to come up with some more reoccurring bits and segments this year to kind of structure the show when we go through the grind of the regular season, but that's going to start with that first recap for Thursday show. We will try to do some live ones this year. The Wednesday one, though, will not be, but it'll go up on YouTube pretty soon after Jake edits it, and we'll go from there. But thanks again for making us your first listen every day. This episode was produced by Jake Stevens. Thanks to him for making Locked On Cavs sound so wonderful. Again, back on Thursday with a recap of the preseason game against the 76ers. We hope you tune in for that. If you want a great second listen today, check out Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Host Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 daily fantasy basketball show on the planet that is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Also, go check out the Ultimate NBA preview from Odyssey. Check out Locked On Guardians. Check out Locked On Browns, Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, all of that great stuff. Until next time, when Evan and I are back together, I'm Chris. Follow me on Twitter at CWMWrites. And peace out, y'all. See you soon.